Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, 4 Nerds by Nerds, hanging out with
Nerdarchy Ted.
And in this video, we ask a viewer's question, can a lion rage?
Jump down the description below where you can sign up for Nerdarchy the newsletter, get weekly gaming tips, as well as learn how to game with Nerdarchy.
And if you would like to send us a viewer suggestion like John did, you can send it at nerdarchy@gmail.com, where he asks the question, can a lion rage? And the question is, and the answer is,
of course.
Of course.
Now, he wants us to do a character build, and he's talking about what happens when you take Druid and Barbarian and you shake it up, and you shape change and rage, what happens? Well,
surprisingly, I don't think we've actually done this build before.
I have.
Well, on camera.
Right.
Here's the hard part, right? The hard part is figuring out the level split, because I feel like Druid and Barbarian, they tend to be classes you really don't want to multi-class with.
Right.
They're really good by themselves. They get a lot of great abilities. There's a huge payoff to taking Barbarian to the end. Also,
same with Druid.
Same with Druid. Being able to wild shape as much as you want is kind of a big deal.
Right.
There's very few downsides to wild shaping.
And specifically most importantly with Barbarian, you're going to get that Keystone ability at 20th level. So if you don't take all 20 levels in Barbarian, you do not get that +4 to Strength and Constitution.
Yeah.
That's huge for this class.
So now there's a couple of things about this particular build. One is, we're thinking Circle of the Moon for Druid, I believe.
Yes. Well, specifically, he's talking about, I want to rage while in wild shape. So to me, this really speaks as I'm kind of going to go, a mix, but probably more heavily on Druid, because it's about wild shaping. So that means you're going to want to have that higher, and you're just augmenting your fighting as a beast with your Druid.
Right. I almost want to say you're probably going to only do like 3 or 4 levels of Barbarian.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably say 4 just to get the ability score bump.
Right.
And then I would just go 16 levels of Druid. That gives you that'll give you all of your stat bumps.
Right.
So you're covered there. You're going to get a couple rages a day, not bad. You'll get some other Barbarian abilities that are very useful when you're raging.
You'll get to choose your archetype, which, depending upon, how many sources you're using, will determine what you're actually going to want to do. So, useful there.
Yeah, I think for this one, we're just going to say Totem of, we're going to go with Totem, and it's probably the one choice we're going to make is probably Bear for resistance. So when we're raging as an animal, we're taking half damage.
Right.
Big deal, because you're an animal, you're probably going to get hit a lot, but they're only taking away from temporary hit points, but you just doubled your temporary hit points,
right? Essentially,
which leads us to another one of our choices, right? What race to go with?
Now there's a lot of choices that go into this, and I look and I know a lot of you are going to be like, oh man, you got to go with half orc because of that knockdown ability and the crit ability. It's really fantastic. But I think a lot of the rest of that, beyond that little bit of damage, you're sacking the rest of your things being in wild shape, because they're about strength and they're about constitution, and you're not going to be fighting as a half orc. You're going to be fighting as an animal. So when I see this particular setup,
well, there's another thing too. I believe, the problem with the half orc is the one ability that I considered made them a viable candidate was when they get dropped to 0. But I believe that wouldn't work for their beast form. Like that would actually they would have to be dropped to 0, not the beast form.
Okay. For
that to come into play.
It says when you are reduced to 0 hit points but not killed outright, you can drop to 1 hit point instead. So I would say on that, as an animal, because if you're in animal form and you're dropped to 0 by a spell-like effect,
but you're not killed.
If you are dropped to 0 in your animal form before you become back to being a druid again, or back to your humanoid form, if there's a addendum to that, the spell takes effect, like disintegrate or power word kill. Those type of things will affect. So I would imagine half orc druid, that would work, and you'd stay in your animal form with 1 hit point.
So so that's the only thing that I'm not sure about. We checked the rules, and it does appear that probably as a half orc, if you're in B shape and you get dropped, you're going to go to 1 hit point. So that makes it more useful.
That would work for me. Intimidation, not going to work.
I don't think I think intimidation does work as a skill, for some of the reasons that we talked about off camera.
Okay.
So intimidation is a skill, not bad. It's an extra skill.
Right.
All right. Extra crit, always good.
Right.
So half orc's pretty viable. Goliath is viable. But we were actually looking at something else.
I want to go in a completely different direction, and it's solely because of the druidic aspect of this character and the stat placement choices. And we'll get into this, and I want to go with Forest Gnome.
Okay.
And Forest Gnome is definitely an odd choice, especially when you're looking at Barbarian. But as we're talking about, we're only talking about 4 levels of Barbarian, and the rest is Druid. And a Forest Gnome Druid totally makes sense to me. So I go with this because, number one, that core ability of speaking with beasts, that seems like a role-playing ribbon choice ability, but I'm tying that heavily to Druid because it's like, all right, what Druid doesn't want to be able to talk to small animals, even if it's a limited option, whenever he wants. Totally fits Druid in me.
Okay, well, I actually was looking at Forest Gnome for another reason.
All right, what is that?
Well, it's not particularly Forest Gnome, but Gnome in general. And that is their magic resistance. Well, it's not necessarily magic resistance, but they have advantage on all mental saves versus spells.
That is totally helpful because it's like, all right, you get into the thick of things, and animals are generally going to be more susceptible to that. But when you wild shape, forget that nonsense. You've got advantage already, and you keep your mentals when you change. So having strong mentals and the ability to have advantage totally rocks.
Yeah, that's going to be super useful. One ability that the Forest Gnome has is Cantrip Minor Illusion. Now, you cannot cast that while you're wild shaped.
Or while you're raging.
But what you can do is cast it, then wild shape and rage, because it is not a concentration effect. So you can technically still have it going on. I don't know what you're going to do with it, but you can definitely have it going on. If you wanted to be a flaming lion or something, or if you wanted to make yourself look different, or you just had an illusion going, you totally do it. There's nothing stopping you from doing it.
Absolutely. All right, so now the thing with raging and in animal form is your physicals are really going to rely on your animal form, much more so than your actual gnome form. So here's where you get to really play with your stat placement. So, all right, as a forest gnome, you're going to get a +2 to intelligence and a +1 to dex. Well, I hate having an 8, and intelligence really isn't important. So we'll put our 8 in intelligence, and we get rid of our negative. In case you want to actually take knowledge nature, now you can do so without actually having to worry about that negative. We're going to put our 13 index because it's a physical and odd, but we're not going to really care about it as much. For your surprise round or what have you, you're going to have a better armor class, so that's going to bump to a 14. Now, our highs of our 15 and our 14, we're actually going to put into wisdom and charisma. Now, having a charismatic gnome barbarian does not seem to make a whole lot of sense, but when you've got a +2 charisma and any kind of roleplay skills, they could totally work, as well as, well, you've got a +2 and you're going to have advantage on your saving throw. So on those rare instances that somebody hits you with a charisma save, you're going to do not too bad. Having a high wisdom score for a druid totally makes sense, totally rocks. No reason why you wouldn't. If you actually ever do get into, well, I'm going to sunbeam and then wild shape and then keep that spell going and blast them, their saves are going to be that much harder. So, again, not bad. That leaves us with a 10 and a 12. I'd put the 10 in strength and I'd put the 12 in constitution, because hit points are important in your regular form.
Yeah, I mean, all that works. And I look at the high charisma as like, well, maybe you actually use it for, maybe you basically are using it for, persuasion checks when you use that speak with animals or something along those lines. And it is your presence as well. So it's not just...
Charismatic druid I don't have a problem with. And, perhaps you make a role-playing choice of you'll only ever rage in animal form because you're calling upon the nature of that spirit, and he's lending you the strength and yada yada yada. Role-play choice, lots of fun.
And also it also makes sure the wild shaping makes your con modifier mean less anyway, because you're going to be dropping in the forms where you're going to get an extra like 30 to 50 hit points, when you start getting up there on levels.
Right.
So, so really an 18 or a 20 con even at 20th level is an extra 100 hit points. Like, I believe that is pretty close to the Ankylosaurus that my son always changes into anyway.
Right.
And you can, and as a druid, you can wild shape multiple times. So that buffer of temporary hit points is going to make a huge difference. And not only that, the ability to heal yourself while you're wild shaped by sacking spells is going to make it last that much longer. And if we're raging and we have the bear totem, we're taking half damage from most
everything
things.
but psychic.
Yes. So really, like, you're going to get a lot of use out of those temporary hit points. The only downside is you're a druid and things like power word kill suck for you.
Power word kill, disintegrate are not your good friend. I tell you that much.
Yeah.
Now, all right, so we've got race, we've got classes. We need a background.
Noble. No.
Yes, a noble gnome.
Barbarian druid. Well, it could if you're going with he's from a tribe of barbaric gnomes and he's the chieftain's son, or
right.
Or he was the chieftain. Noble would actually work, but it doesn't really work with the benefits of noble. Actually, on this one, I would actually probably go with Outlander.
I thought you don't like Outlander in any of the nature-based classes.
I generally don't, but because this guy's so unorthodox, I feel like it just kind of works.
So I never have a problem taking Outlander. I would probably look at Hermit. I like Hermit and Druid together.
The Hermit works as well, and it very much has that feel for that kind of outcast for a wilderness character, or any character, but in particular a wilderness character.
Yeah, and typically, like, you've got the Hermit of, I've been alone and blah, blah, blah. But, dude, this guy can talk to animals. So he's not going to suffer that,
He's Snow Whiting it in the forest someplace.
Basically.
And then, like, you could do the Shrek Snow White when things go south, before he starts raging.
So, what do you guys think of a forest gnome, hermit, or outlander, barbarian druid? Let us know down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
Hey, you can tweet at us over at Nerdarchy.
So until next time, stay nerdy.